Well, welcome back to Decoding the Conflict Mindset, and today's episode is all about parenting, trauma, loss, resiliency, self-esteem. My guest speaker today is Yarona Boster. She comes to us as a certified life coach. She's also an acclaimed TEDx speaker, as I soon will be, and with that, she brings a certain clarity and understanding and insight into this whole field of trauma and parenting as the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. Talk about a different lens in which to view the world. And so with that, Yarona has a passion for working with parents in all walks of life. And she particularly emphasizes self-esteem versus image esteem, and how is our motivation connected to each of those. And so please stay around. We're going to get started very soon, and Yarona is soon to release her own book called Unspoken Signals, due to be out in the fall of 2023. But she is also the host of her own parenting podcast, The Evolution of Parenting. So lots to learn from her, lots of great resources. So do come back. Again, we'll be starting shortly. Please spread this out. Share this with your other parents that you know in your life and see how you can all benefit from this very intriguing perspective. So stay tuned. If you haven't already, subscribe below. Come on back. We'll see you in a little bit. Well, welcome, Yarona Boster. I'm so delighted to have you here, and particularly around your messaging around parents, self-esteem, confidence, and those kinds of things. And so, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, I know we normally talk about the workplace, and yet at the same time, many of us are all parents. And so, I'd like you to start off with sharing with our viewers and listeners, just how did you get involved in this particular focus of your work? Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Sure. So I'd say it kind of became a compilation of personal family things combined with professional things, and they sort of coalesced. So I'm actually the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. He passed. So my life, I always knew there was something different about, and I learned early on about the cruelty of humanity, but also the kindness of humanity. And my parents were teachers. My sister was is a teacher. Their teaching was always a part of the blood of my family as well. And then my niece was born with a severe, very rare recessive genetic disorder. And we did not know what it was at the time, but I had graduated college with my Bachelor of Science in Public Health, and I flitted around a little bit here and there work-wise, and I was looking to my master's, and all sorts of things sort of coalesced. And then my sister had an opportunity for me to start to work in a program and run a program for early intervention, which is a program for babies birth to 3 with developmental delays and disabilities. So I ended up running that program, and then I ended up moving to a different agency, same program, different agency. And it is a federally and state-funded program. At least in New Jersey, it's state-funded. Some states only have a federal mandate. But it taught me a lot about early childhood development, the ins and outs of disabilities in early childhood as well. And my nephew was also born with the same disease a few years after my niece. And that's when they figured out it was genetic. They didn't realize it was because they tested and there were nothing was coming back. So it was a combination of personal and professional. And for 15 years, I stayed in this field, and I loved every moment of it. I loved the idea of, not even the idea of, but actually being someone's resource and touchstone when they're in those first very tumultuous years, and especially the guilt that tends to come along with being the parent of a child with a developmental delay or disability. There's this added very complex layer, like, did I do something wrong? And so on and so forth. And then I also started to notice a transition, a change in the parenting methodology of a lot of the parenting methods a lot of parents started to deal with. We used to have a lot of authoritarian style parenting.
Yeah.
And it has changed significantly and rapidly, I'd say, over the last 40, 50 years or so. And it doesn't sound like it sounds like 40, 50 years is not a rapid change, but that it actually is, if you look at the grand scheme of things. But with the change came a very nuanced differences of parenting styles, people who didn't want to do authoritarian parenting. So they wanted to change that, but they didn't know where to go. And it's funny, when we want something to change, we usually start to recognize I don't like X. I need to do differently than X. But more often than not, we're not usually taught what else can we do. We're not often learned enough in knowing about basic human development to understand what's happening in the background of brain development, to get really evidence-based strategies that make sense, that are also realistic for each and every parent, and that are individualized, because every human being born is different from every other human being born. And as a result, you cannot have cookie cutter strategies. You have to have very individualized. So at the end of 2021, I officially left my full-time work, and I completed my certification as a life coach. I now have my advanced certification as a life coach, and I specialize in parenting, but I also specialize in infertility, loss, and trauma.
Oh, okay.
And a large component to that has to do with my own personal experiences and vast knowledge as in an advocacy component. And that's kind of where I come from today. It's a mix and match of different professional sides, personal sides, to bring me to this place where I just want to be of help to others. Ultimately, when you boil it all down.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, Yarona. We all have a story, and and how much our story really shapes not only who we are in our adult lives, but also the paths that we take.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when it's funny, because my TEDx talk is how loss shapes who we are and how we live. But it's true. What I find very interesting is I was recently, I wouldn't say so recently, but reading a psychology journal, because I love to do that. And
Me too.
Yeah, right. Okay, so loving the geek out moments.
Yeah.
But I was reading something that showed about some of the newer research that says that personality traits, mental health disorders, even behavioral disorders, are about 40 to 60% of a person's actual makeup, their DNA genetically coded makeup. And the rest is environmental. And environmental is combined by your caregivers, your primary caregivers, your familial input, whoever that might be. If you live in a larger community with a lot of cousins and aunties and things of that nature, you could have that. If you live in an area where you're very socialized, or if you live in an area where you're very cut off, there's so many factors that go into the environmental component. But what I want a lot of parents to understand is you're not working with a clean slate.
Yeah.
Your child is already going to be predisposed. Here's the kicker, though. You're not going to know what that predisposition is. So it's up to you as a parent to learn that. You're kind of already working at a deficit and behind the eight ball. And I think that what I find incredible, and something that I talk to a lot of people about, is there's no society on this earth that requires people to read a book or take a basic class on child development to learn how to be a stable, healthy parent before they become one.
Yeah.
Or even just to understand what's happening in my child's brain development.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about reproduction. I'm actually talking about the moment from, birth, maybe even pre-birth, during pregnancy, to really into adulthood and even into the changes into adulthood, that it's necessary to understand why is this happening, to understand how you can address the what's happening.
Yeah.
Because it's so individualized. The way I work with parents is we're going to figure out with you what works best for you and what works best for your child, because your unique relationship with your child is as unique as you each as individuals. It's going to be different for your partner or your spouse. It's going to be different for grandma or grandpa or aunties, uncles, all of these people. Everybody's going to have a unique relationship experience. And so that means that the strategies you use are going to change based on that and over time.
Yeah.
So, for instance, what used to work with my son, doing some counting stuff and things like that when he was upset, doesn't work anymore, because now he's 5 and it's changed. So everything's constantly evolving. And it's one of the reasons why my podcast is called The Evolution of Parenting, because it's an evolution.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop. The relationship you have as a parent with your child never stops. You never stop being a parent, but it does change the way you parent.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I share with people, I mean, going back to what you said a little bit earlier, is that, even before the child is born, we're influencing. And I'll share a quick story, because when I had my first child, and I was later in life, and but I had to take the last 2 months off, due to some, pre-birth complications, and so I had to relax. And I own my own business, and it was like, oh my God, and so I was working remotely way back when, and so and so I would listen to certain music at the time, and my daughter at one point approached me and said, my friends tell me I have a really interesting taste in music. And I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, what kind of music do you like? She goes, well, I like this Enya, and then I like this, Willie and Lobo. And she goes, nobody's ever heard of them before. And I said, oh my gosh, that's what I used to listen to when you were still in my womb, And so the learning starts so early on, and in how we influence. And so part of what you talk about is self-esteem versus image esteem.
Yeah.
What matters and what motivates. And so elaborate on that a little bit more, Yarona.
Yeah, this is so important. So self-esteem is what you think of yourself. Image esteem, it's not what others think of you, it's how you perceive others think of you. That's what image esteem is. There's a huge difference there. So your perception of what others' thoughts are of you, if your image esteem is rising higher than your self-esteem, you are going to be more conditioned to want to seek approval of others. You're going to be more conditioned to try to conform to what others want of you. You're going to be more of what we call a people pleaser. That is what's going to happen. Now, what's very interesting is, genetically speaking, and this is really from a much, I am a firm believer that gender is what you make of it, but there is a certain component to a gender makeup, and a part of it is societal conditioning that leads us to treat girls differently than we treat boys. And boys' self-esteem will actually be much more encouraged in the early years than girls. Girls will be much more conditioned to be nurturers. Well, what is a nurturer? A nurturer is somebody who takes care of others. Here's the thing. Take care of others, take care of others, others. That other focus leads into don't just take care of others, but care about what others think of you.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why social media is so detrimental for young teen girls and even preteen girls is because that care of others' perception of them, that image esteem, is heightened. The importance of it is put on almost a pedestal. And so when it's blown by having poor likes on a post or no likes or cyberbullying or in-person bullying, all of these things diminish the girl's self-esteem. And again, the same can happen for boys. So I'm not discounting that this doesn't happen for boys, but it happens differently. Let's say a boy is poor at sports, or maybe all his friends are really big into gaming, and that boy is not as good at gaming. Those things, wherever it's a moment where how you do something or your image in that moment matters more than the you behind that. And so I say one of the most important things to do is cultivate your child's self-esteem. And some of the ways we can do that is, don't press upon your child what you think they should be wearing, what you think they should be doing, how you think they should be engaging in social activities. So I'll give you an example. When my son was, so 4, this was last summer. My sister was in the country. She and her family live in another country, and Israel actually, and they came in for visits, and it was really great. And my sister and I were taking my son to Barnes and Noble, and he decided he was going to wear his pajamas. It was fine. They were coming, and I'm like, all right. Then he decided he was going to wear his construction vest, his construction hat, and his Mickey slippers.
Ooh. What a combination.
I know. And I said, okay, are you comfortable in that? Yes, Mommy, I'm fine. I said, all right, did you check outside to see how the weather is, if you're comfortable with the weather? Yes, it's fine. Okay. The only thing, Connor, the only thing to remember is that your slippers, we don't wear our outdoor shoes inside our house. We put them by the door. So I said, if you take those slippers outside, they're going to be outdoor slippers. They're going to become outdoor slippers. That means you don't get to wear your Mickey slippers around the house. Are you okay with that? Yeah, Mommy, I'm okay with that. All right, well, let's go. And off we went. And it was such a wonderful, now this is easier. Again, it's easier with young children because their image esteem is based off of the people who influence them. It starts there. So now I had no problem with it. My sister had no problem with it. My husband was a little embarrassed, but when I told him about it, but he was like, all right, I got to get over it. That's on me. And again, it's that moment of realizing, are you upset about his clothing choice out there, or are you upset about how he will be perceived?
Yeah.
Because you can't protect your kids from being made fun of, but you can build enough of their self-esteem resilience so that they don't care if they're made fun of. That's a distinct difference, right? There are always going to be cruel people out there. Kids are always going to end up, kids can be particularly vicious. So,
but where does that come from?
That actually, okay, so that's a huge piece. But to go back
modeling
to
from the parents,
right? I from the parents, but I want to go back to this and give you a different perspective. I did a workshop, and at the end of the workshop, I was talking with the parents, and I always asked them what they got out of it. One of the moms was like, "I got out of it that I need to make a lot of changes on myself and for myself first." And then we were chatting a little bit more, and I was telling them the funny story about Connor. And she said, her husband insists her son wears button-down shirts and khakis to school. Yeah. And her son doesn't want to. And I said, so if your son, if his autonomous choice is to pick for himself jeans and a t-shirt, and they're not inappropriate for school, like if it was a school with a uniform, okay, fine. That's one thing. That's a rule that he has to follow. But if it's his dad's opinion over his opinion, well, here's the thing about autonomy for children. There are only 2 things that they have that they can make autonomous choices over: their body and their personal space. Whatever you deem as their personal space. So if you invade their bodily autonomy and their personal space all the time, this is one of the core ways to crash someone's self-esteem. Okay. And it's parents, you need to wake up. Even when my son chooses whether or not he's going to wear a jacket is still his choice. And I'm going to tell you why. We run at different body temperatures. When I'm cold and I put on a jacket, my mom used to get this really funny thing she would say. She would be like, I'm cold, put on a jacket. And I'm like, wait a second. Now, if somebody else's body temperature is different and they know their body, unless they have a specific sensory disorder that where you have to care for those needs, they know their body. So I say, Connor, jacket or no jacket? Oh, mommy, no jacket. I'm gonna go out like this. Okay. I think it's a little bit cold outside, so I'm gonna bring your jacket with us when we go places, where we're going or whatever, because it's your body, it's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get cold, you get to make the choice to put your jacket on. Now, you want to know something? He picks the jacket when he's cold. I promise you that.
Mm-hmm.
The more you push something on someone and crash through their bodily autonomy, the more resistance you're going to get.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a lot more likeliness of people saying, you know what, this is my choice. I'm going to take my jacket.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think what I'm getting from that then too is giving, even at a young age, is you're really sort of modeling and coaching your children on how to make choices, how to make decisions, how to evaluate situations. And I know, I've worked a lot with parents over the course of my career too, unfortunately, largely in divorce. But as far as, those teachable moments, and really rethink, how do we parent, particularly when we're not in a two-parent household, and that there are really wonderful opportunities. Not that I'm, fostering divorce, but there are really some wonderful opportunities that come from teachable moments for kids, when we have that opportunity to, again, explore and show them a different way of thinking. It's like, you know what, my thought is that it's cold outside, and so I'm going to wear a jacket, and I'm going to take your jacket in case you decide it's cold for you too. But now you're including them. And so I know I talk a lot to parents as far as we shift from that authoritarian, kind of model of parenting to more of a coaching, directing kind of parenting model.
Yes, but here's the thing. What happened for a lot of parents was shifting from authoritarian to permissive parenting, wanting to be their kid's friend. When they had so many restrictions growing up and so much like, you do what I say because I'm your parent and I told you so, right?
Yeah.
So many people were like, I don't like that. So I'm going to be my kid's friend and they're going to trust me because they're going to believe that I'm listening to them and stuff like that. But that's not healthy either.
Yeah.
Permissive can be so detrimental because what it does is it removes safety nets.
Yeah.
And boundaries. Boundaries are a must because we have life boundaries. Okay. I went to a meeting once and there was a mom. Our meetings used to be in the home. When we walk in and the 2-year-old was climbing the drapes. And I was like, okay, literally climbing the drapes. And I looked at the mom and I said, are you okay with this? And she said, well, I don't want him to be restricted. I don't want to tell him no. I want him to feel like the sky is the limit. Now, here's where the ding, ding, ding was coming in of she's feeling guilty because she sees her child has some kind of developmental delay, some sort of deficit. So what she's doing is saying, I want him to just feel so unrestricted elsewhere in life because his disability may lend to restrictions that, impede upon him. So from a very loving place, that's where she was coming. But what she was doing was limiting his capacity to learn about life boundaries. And so I said to her this, okay, in your opinion, when he's old enough, would you be comfortable with him going skydiving? And she said, yeah, of course, why not? If that's what he wants to do and he's capable of doing it, why not? Sure. I said, all right. What if he wanted to go skydiving without a parachute?
Yeah.
And I said, because if he wants that, that's going to be the last thing he does.
Yeah.
One of the reasons as an adult, one of the responsibilities as an adult, as a parent, is to help guide your children with the experience and knowledge you have, right? We understand it's not okay to cross the street without looking and making sure we're safe, but kids don't have that kind of environmental awareness yet. You have to teach them that environmental awareness because life has natural boundaries. And there are a couple of rings of boundaries in life. So the first one that we tend to teach our children is the physical safety security boundary, the ultimate boundary that is death, right? We teach them, well, you can't jump off of a roof with a cape on and expect to be safe. You can't run across the street, get hit by a car, and keep on walking, right? Those are those safety, security, physical measures of boundaries, right? Life's natural boundary limitations.
Mhm.
Then we've got our societal boundaries and limitations. And so many people right now are so fighting against this, right?
Yeah.
But here's the deal, people. You live in a society. The reason that a society functions is because there are basic rules that everybody's supposed to be following. That's how we're able to get along. Otherwise, it would just be chaos and it would just be survival of the fittest. One of the reasons humans don't live that way is actually because of something in our brain that is the empathy connection. Otherwise, we would have a civilization would have evolved to it's always survival of the fittest, dominate or be dominated.
Right.
The reason we don't do that is because there is a coding in our survival mechanism that relies upon human connection. And empathy developed out of that human connection, the need for tribalism and all that sort of stuff. So there's actually a huge component to the psychology and the background of survival. But then, so societal boundaries are necessary. You cannot drive on a highway at 200 miles an hour and ensure your safety and the safety of other people around you. So this is where a lot of people are stuck right now, but there's other boundaries that are also really important. And those are the interpersonal boundaries and then the personal self boundaries. So when we have interpersonal boundaries, let's say you're at work, right? Well, let's say you start working for a company and they tell you, okay, you need to be in at 8 o'clock every morning. Oh, well, 8 o'clock doesn't work for me. Okay, this is a working rule. This is our time. We are not going to make exceptions for you because then we'd have to be making exceptions for everybody. It would be chaos and we wouldn't be able to function as a company. Oh, you want to smoke in the building? Well, nobody's allowed to smoke in the building. You don't get an exception for that. The only exceptions that should ever be would be to accommodate somebody who has a disability or a delay. And now coming from the field of disabilities, there were consistent amount. I worked in a program that actually had a multitude of like residential programs for adults with disabilities, job programs, all these sorts of things. And so that makes a lot of sense when it comes to disabilities. But that doesn't mean that if there's a handicap parking spot, when I would drive around with my sister and my niece and nephew and stuff like that, we would use the handicap spots. When the kids weren't with us, my sister would park the van somewhere else because she understood the need for those spots more than most people.
Yeah.
And then one time I was in one of those spots with my niece. I had gone into a store with her and I came back out riding her wheelchair out and somebody had parked in the spot next to us and they were over the lines that are there for the lift to go down. I couldn't unload the lift to put my niece in and her wheelchair into the vehicle. We had to go back into the store. My niece was getting upset and we had to go back into the store, call these people out and get them to move their car. Now that's not nearly as bad as the time that my sister's lift got run over by somebody who decided to drive into that line slot. And again, so there are levels of societal and interpersonal boundaries that we all have to respect and pay attention to. And I think that is getting crumbled in this day and age.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of the crumbling because of permissive parenting. And I can, go on and on about that.
And I can't agree with you enough as far as, we go through generational changes and, societal influences, and, how I parented as an older parent may have been different than somebody else who was a younger parent, but still with children my same age. And I'll have to share with you that another thing my kids told me after they went off to college and stuff, it's like, oh my God, Mom, it's like, I just can't believe some of these parents I'm meeting. It's like, oh, where are their heads, and like you said, a lot of permissive, I want to be your friend kind of thing, and parents and adult kids, having phone conversations every day. And not that that's a bad thing, but again, it's like, wait a minute, we're supposed to foster our kids to become, responsible, respectable, motivated, kinds of adults. And so, how are we helping our kids in that respect? And so,
It's not easy. And I'm
no,
going to tell you this too. Self-esteem and image esteem, it doesn't go away when you
yeah,
become an adult. There's always a component to that. You're a human being. I always find it really funny that we have this weird reference to children almost as if they're a separate entity from us when we're just the grown version of ourselves when we were kids, right?
yeah,
So here's the thing about that. And this is, I have parents who are like, Yarona, I agree with everything you're saying. I agree. But here's the problem. My kid will be alone in not getting a phone. All his friends are getting phones. All his friends are getting tablets. All da 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 da. Bear with me though. There are a lot more parents who agree with this, but are afraid to speak up than there are parents who actually are perfectly content with the current way that we throw devices at our little ones.
yeah. Oh,
And so you need to find that support system. You need to find the support system of other parents out there. And there are a lot. There's a really wonderful organization called waituntil8th.org. And it's meaning wait until 8th grade to give your child a personal handheld device. And because think about it, if you're a 13, 14-year-old, it's a different circumstance. Or maybe like a little less, like 12, 13 or so. It's different, at least your brain development is somewhat along, coming along where you can start to make more critical decisions and have a little bit more regulation over your self-control and your impulse control.
Right.
Here's the problem though. What a lot of parents don't understand is that giving a personal handheld device, especially one that has games on it, to a young child to keep them occupied because they're crying, they're complaining, we're at a doctor's office, we're going on a car ride, we're going out to dinner, all of these reasons. Oh, it's just easier. It's just easier.
yeah,
Would you give your child heroin?
yeah.
Would you give your child cocaine to make it easier on you? Because all the research now that we have shows that the same thing is happening in the brain as drugs, alcohol, all of that stuff. If you were to give your child a drug and alcohol, you'd be hitting the same receptors in the brain that the personal handheld device is doing.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, but I'm not giving my 5-year-old heroin. It's just not happening. I'm not going to hand them a beer and say, go for it, baby, chug away.
Yeah.
And that's what I want parents to understand. They think it's easier on them, but the amount of detriment it's having on their child, those funny videos of parents unplugging their kid's video game and then the kid flipping out. Do you know that what they actually did in that unplug moment? It's like literally taking drugs out of the hands of an addict.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we adults have enough impulse control and suddenly are aware, oh man, I've been on my phone a lot this week. Can you imagine a non-fully developed brain? They don't even understand the why that's a problem. And you cannot reason with a drug addict.
Right.
So you have to make the proper boundaries and limitations. My son watches TV, yes. And I want everybody to understand this. I am not a perfect parent. I'm not. And if you ever find a parenting expert who says that they are, run away. Please.
Yeah.
I'm not an I hate calling myself an expert. I'm knowledgeable. I'm very knowledgeable, very certified, very aware, I've got a lot of information. But I'm not perfect and I make mistakes and I humanize those mistakes to my son every single day. He has to understand that I make those mistakes. But here's the thing. He watches TV with us, but for him, it's a social activity.
Yeah.
For him, he likes that. His tablet, we have a tablet, but honestly, we usually put on audiobooks to listen to it in the evening before he falls asleep because he's not reading yet. So that's what we use it for. The rare times he actually uses it, we're very strict on that. And it's so limited that he knows he's limited. And even then he'll fight us on it sometimes when he's gotten into the drug addiction moment.
Yeah.
Like if we have a really long car ride and we let him have it, you can see a shift. If we don't take it away at certain time frames, suddenly he's starting to enjoy the drug. And then he's, wait, why are you taking it from me? And he flips out. And that's why I'm like, whoop, too much. We did too much. We got to course correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is so important too. And this is true in adulthood and in the workplace as well, as far as setting appropriate boundaries without being restrictive, and controlling. And a lot of it, again, we set the stage in those early years of development. And you mentioned this earlier, as far as just the cognitive functioning and development of our brain. Young children and even middle schoolers they're not there yet. And I gosh, I've just seen too many situations where it's like, what? It's like, I don't quite say that to the parents I'm coaching, but it's like, what might be the implications of that? Because they don't have the capacity. They're not, you know, from a brain development standpoint, they're not there yet.
Right.
And our brains continue to grow until we're about 26,
Yep.
And so it's like, that's why we have, that's why so many young adults have,
Right.
challenging behaviors, And
Right.
so, yeah.
And we do understand that there's a component to neuroplasticity that can occur in adulthood.
Right.
But when we're talking about impulse control, critical thinking, decision making, all that sort of stuff, that's not there until your mid-late 20s. So,
Yeah.
and here's the thing though, the more you replicate poor decision making, critical thinking, and impulse control, the longer it will take to repair that damage. It is like doing a drug for a long period of time. Your body sustains damage over time. So does your brain development.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of kids who, when I was running my program, we used to have a lot of kids who would come in with behavioral issues. And what I quickly realized was a huge component of those stemmed from the parents.
Yeah.
And it quickly became apparent. And now early intervention is called a family training model. It's a family training model for a reason, because we're training the family how to work with their child. And I would say this to parents: a baby birth to 3, their average waking hours in a given week is 80 hours. If we're here 1, 2, even 4, 5 hours a week, what's happening the other 75 hours? Because if you're not taking these strategies and modeling them and trying to adapt them into your life, then really the progress is going to be minimal. That said, what I also would tell my staff is you've got to meet them where they're at. Right. If the strategies are not the right kind of strategies for the family, because in the area we worked in, this vast diversity of socioeconomic differences, cultural diversity, so much differences that a parent in one town could have all the time to dedicate to their child's developmental needs. And another parent is trying to work 3 jobs, get food on the table, make ends meet, and keep a roof over their head. So it's different. So that's why I say the strategies have to be diverse enough to meet the people, to get to know first their situation and their circumstances, then get to know them, how they tick, how their kids tick, and all of that, and then get them to understand that it's a constantly changing circumstance. So it's the same thing as food. Your baby doesn't like that food. When was the last time you tried it? Oh, a year ago? Try it again. Yeah. My son is we're constantly, he's a vegetable and fruit eater, and he loves his veggies and fruits, but it's very rare he'll eat meat. But we still introduce the meat to him. We still try and everything, but ultimately it's his body, it's his choice. That said, we understand that nutrients are necessary where he doesn't have a full understanding of that. So it means that we have to make specific choices to ensure his nutrients are being met.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's, again, many of us are parents, and even though we can be highly intelligent and very well educated, that doesn't mean we're doing making good choices as parents. And like you said in the very beginning of our discussion, is that there's very little. I mean, we can naturally have children, and so forth, but we don't naturally have the skills necessary to be good parents. And so parenting is a skill set in and of itself right there. And how we parent, can have such significant impact and effects on our children that we're bringing into the world, and we're shaping the futures of their lives.
Yeah. And, I have a funny thing. My sister and I, after my nephew was born, my sister and I she'd sometimes say to me, surprisingly, he didn't pop out with his own user-specific manual. I don't know. I missed the manual, and not
Yeah.
even like a general broad manual on kids, but like, again, user specific, because the person is individual. We have such a better understanding that you're as unique as 1 in 4 trillion, which is so incredible to me. All the human beings who have ever lived, come and gone, are unique as 1 in 4 trillion. Which is wild. So that's your unique perspective. You're a unique human being. And therefore, everything we do is always going to be trial and error, practice, practice, practice. And understand and know you will make mistakes. They are a given. But if you are willing to own those mistakes, especially in front of your children, you know what it does? It removes their stress and anxiety over disappointing you, over worrying about what you'll think of them, over fear of punishment, all of these things. And they're going to be more likely to actually admit and own their own mistakes as well.
Which ties into the other question I wanted to ask you then, as far as how does this, this whole sense of self-esteem and, the image esteem, but then motivation. And how are we impacting your kids in terms of their own motivation?
Motivation is such an amazing thing because there's a few components to it. There's what we call optimal and suboptimal motivation, and they come from our intrinsic versus extrinsic motivators. So intrinsic motivators are things we're naturally geared towards, right? Somebody might be born and they have a natural preference for athleticism. For them, their de-stress is going to work out. Whereas for me, it's like, oh God, I got to exercise. So for me, it's an extrinsic motivator. I know I need it, but I'm not intrinsically motivated to do it. Now, externally, we've got the optimal versus suboptimal motivators. So something is optimal when it's motivating them to do something that's necessary, taking into account their intrinsic motivators. So for instance, if my son, and he does love dancing and we put music on and we dance around the house to it. One of the ways I can get him to clean up is to have a dance party cleanup. I'm utilizing his intrinsic motivator to get him optimally motivated to do something that is a chore. Very rarely do people like to do chores or deal with their responsibilities. Although there are some people. I used to love to clean up. I was naturally inclined to cleaning. My mom was so proud of me. 3 years old, she put my folded laundry on my bed and my sister's beds and stuff, and I would immediately start putting them in my drawers, and she would tell her friends, like, my 3-year-old puts her clothes away. So again, if something is not intrinsic to somebody, you have to figure out a way around it. Now, for kids, it's all about play. Play and imagination is what breeds their interest. So there's nothing wrong with making something playful in order to get them to do and complete a responsibility, because you know what happens? Inevitably, the play lessens but the desire to do that responsibility, you've now created a habit. And that responsibility no longer seems as daunting. Now, what's suboptimal is punishment. And random punishment is just random cruelty. Okay. So there is a thing as discipline. Discipline is absolutely necessary. But what we call natural consequential discipline, right? The natural consequences of your actions, it has to be related. So if your kid is, let's say your kid is on a tablet, okay? And you're like, okay, it's time I told you it's going to be 5 minutes of the tablet and you've got to come off of it now because it's dinner time and we eat together as a family. That's a part of our house rules. And the kid decides to throw that tablet. Well, they've thrown away the responsibility that they had to the ownership of that tablet. And I hope that parents set up responsibility of ownership on things, right? So that's something that takes a lot of learning as well. But now your 7-year-old, your 8-year-old threw their tablet. Well, a natural consequence of that would be to take away the tablet. Absolutely. Because they've shown a lack of being capable of responsible. But if you say to them, all right, no more tablet, no more TV, no more gaming, no more da 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 da. Now what you've just done is set up punishment for punishment's sake,
Yeah.
just for the cruelty, just to impose your authority over them.
Right.
And that's not okay.
Yeah. And I see that so often. It's like, parents imposing, boundaries and discipline, and then it's like way overboard in comparison to what the infringement actually was, and it's just like, what are we teaching our kids? You just become so restrictive now that now you've created an unrealistic situation, and they're not learning anything from that.
And this goes back to self-esteem, because when you randomly punish your child, that authoritarian moment of parenting comes in, where it's what we call a hierarchical attitude of authority, right? You have hierarchy over me, you have authority. And here's where the biggest detriment comes in. It lowers the person's self-esteem. It forces them to want to be people-pleasing to someone in authority or hierarchy over them. And it crosses sometimes serious personal boundaries as a result. So one of the things that can do is possibly hurt that person in a horribly intimate physical way, because they've chosen somebody in their life who exhibits authority over them, and they allow them to get away with things they wouldn't normally. From an outsider's perspective looking in, you're being abused by your spouse, or you're being, God forbid, you're being assaulted or something of that nature. Well, a part of it was because you were conditioned to allow people in places of authority to randomly provide cruelty to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could go on with several stories, from the work that I do too, as far as how evident that is and how it really sets up people to, I've got a couple of workplace interventions right now where it's like, it's like,
Yeah.
Passive aggressive behavior and victim mentality, and poor me, and everybody else is out to get me, and so it's really dysfunctional for the team, and work is not being performed and delivered the way it's expected. But again, it's not so much what's happening in the current, but it's how this person was conditioned,
Right.
in their development into adulthood and so forth. So Yarona, you and I could talk on forever about parenting and examples and things like that. And I'm so delighted that I had the opportunity to meet you. I just want to share with our listeners and viewers that we met in New York City. You're from New Jersey, I'm from California, but we met because we were both speakers for the STAR conference. So it's all about dealing with stress and trauma and emotions and things like that. And so I'd like people to know how they can reach out to you, and because you have some wonderful pearls of wisdom. I've learned so much from you today, and I've got a long background in child psychology and psychology, et cetera. And but I do focus on adults in the workplace and help them emerge through their own traumas to get to a better place of self-esteem and motivation and so forth. But so tell us how people can reach you.
The best place to reach out to me is through my website, footprintscoaching.org. All one word, footprints, multiple, plural, footprintscoaching.org. Okay. And that is the best way, because you can go right there, and you can see my other media appearances. You can see I've been doing a live show with actually somebody else in California for a while, but we're going to be doing our last show coming up next week, because I've just got so much on my plate. I'm actually going to be releasing a parenting book at the end of the year, and I just released a parenting podcast with a co-host, one of my awesome peer coaches that I met through the certification program that I was going through, and his name is Robert Hulse. And that's our new podcast called The Evolution of Parenting. It's on Podbean and Podchaser, and we're working on getting it on Apple and Spotify as well. You can also find me through LinkedIn. You can find me through Facebook and Instagram, but not as much, just because I'm not a big social media person, and I don't have a big social media presence because I love the interpersonal. That's what lights me up always. So I have a tendency to meet more people in much more organically natural circumstances. But yeah, please. And if you know people who you want to send my way, that's really great. I also do a lot of work with advocacy on legislation for infertility. So if you're ever looking for infertility support information, that's a separate thing that I can absolutely give you. If you're looking for a coach in infertility as well, if you're looking for a coach if you're dealing with losses, because I do a lot of that too. So
well, that's we need people like you. And I'm already thinking of a couple of clients I have that pass on to you in terms of their particular your particular specialty, their particular needs and concerns. And because I always like to say is that we all have our stuff, we all have our stories, we all have our issues. And so that whole image thing that you talked about earlier is so important, because we're not perfect. And striving for perfection is so unrealistic. If anything, and you said this before too, as far as practicing, and so practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And so, we make mistakes. And so being resilient, being flexible, and what can I learn? Well, Albert Einstein says, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And I love that quote.
Yep. And for me, it's all about progress and recognizing that my favorite quote is, life is not measured by the breaths we take, but the moments that take our breath away.
Oh, I love that one. Yes.
And I believe that the moments that take our breath away are all of them, the good, the bad, the mundane, all of these have an opportunity to take our breath away if we're willing.
Yep. Well, Yarona, thank you so much. I mean, again, you're just a walking encyclopedia of knowledge and information. And again, I've been around longer than you. I think it's evident by looking at us, but I learned so much from you, and I so enjoyed meeting you. And I said, okay, you got to be on my podcast. Again, we're all parents, and so I typically focus on the workplace, but a lot to be learned. And a lot to grow from. So thank you so much. And for our viewers and listeners, again, some of what Yarona has said will be in the show notes that will come out with the premiere of our recording today. And pass this on. Again, so many of us are parents, so pass it on. We all can learn and live and grow. And so do subscribe to Decoding the Conflict Mindset, and make sure that you get notified of next episodes. And again, Yarona is available. She has her own podcast, and lot to learn, lot to live, and lot to grow. Thank you so much, Yarona.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you found Yarona Boster an amazing resource of information, knowledge, and insight into the world of parenting and some of the challenges that we face. I found it particularly illustrating as far as her past as being a product of a Holocaust survivor and the lessons learned from that. Well, we keep on learning, and this time we're going to revisit somebody who's been here in the past, Jeff Zaino. Jeff plays a very prominent role in the American Arbitration Association, headquartered in New York City. And Jeff was a delight to have on my podcast, Decoding the Conflict Mindset, when our world turned upside down with the advent of the pandemic. Jeff was very instrumental in quickly pivoting the legal field in terms of arbitration and mediation into the virtual medium. His office in New York City became sort of a spotlight for what to do and how to conduct virtual and hybrid meetings. And to this day, they continue to be a model and a forerunner in leading the way for lawyers and mediators and arbitrators to do things up to date and in the current, what do we want to say? I don't even know what to call this. But anyway, Jeff is here to talk to us about the post-pandemic future of ADR, and so and using our technology. So mark your calendars, let others know, particularly those in the legal and mediation worlds. this is something that they want to listen to. His last episode was so well received, and I'm sure you'll glean a great deal. Jeff's a delighting and exciting speaker and full of knowledge and wisdom. Dr. Deborah Dupree, come join us with many thought leaders from all walks of life in how to decode the conflict mindset.